Welcome back. This is Jess. Welcome back to Hot Takes and Deep Dives. And I'm psyched to be chatting with Kate Casey. Your podcast is Reality Life, and you actually get to interview a ton of the producers and creators of a lot of reality shows, like not even just on Bravo, but also Netflix. Did you get hooked on The Real World back in the day? Like, what was your entry point to reality TV?
Well, the first television show that I remember getting hooked into was The Real World Marathon, Real World Season 1. But I think that I was always kind of attuned to the reality world space because I'm always somebody who's been incredibly curious about other people. So I would pour through my mom's yearbook as a kid and ask her questions about our classmates and what street did they grow up on and what were their parents' names and what did they do and did they have siblings and what happened to them at the reunion. And she told this great story about this girl named Abby in her class, and she was gawky and she didn't really have anybody that would ask her to the prom. And then they went back for the 10-year reunion, and she became the Chantilly girl, the perfume. She was a model. And then all these guys were like staring at her. And it was just this great moment that she came back and she was like, screw you guys. And I just lived for stories like that. And so I'm somebody, like, if I go to a hotel and I'm at the pool, I'm just sitting there looking at all the people at the pool and wondering where they live and where they went to school and what do they do and if they're married and if they got divorced before, why did that happen? What are the names of the kids and why did they name their kids that? And so I meet somebody and I immediately suck them in and I want to know everything about them. And I think that that's why I love reality TV, is just it's an extension of that. I think I have a photographic memory for details about people.
I want to get into more of your life, but this is the rundown, guys. We're going to run through a bunch of shows and kind of like catch up on what's been going on, things that I haven't had a chance to kind of give my hot takes on. This is what the rundown is. We're going to talk about Selling Sunset. I do have some things to say about Tinsley's final episode. And there have also been some great documentaries that just premiered on Netflix, Disclosure specifically. I want to talk about that. But first, you live in the OC. So does that have anything to do with how you got into Housewives from the jump?
Yeah, I met my husband on Match.com and I lived in LA and he started a software company in Orange County. So we moved down, and at the same time, my husband's best friend said, you really got to pursue this comedy thing. So I was taking classes at the Groundlings Theater and also at night writing recaps of television shows. And I got hooked into Real Housewives of Orange County with the first episode. Wow. Because it was right up my alley. This idea of all these women and what their lives are like in this gated community. But also I moved into Orange County. So it was just sort of like a bizarro world. I had my own blog and it was popular. It was called Love and Knuckles. For a long time, people would follow and my recaps. I was so dedicated to it to the point of absurdity. Like, I'd go on vacation and I'd stay up late and watch a Bravo show like in Hawaii and then write a recap. And my husband's like, you got to like calm down. But I was so committed. I didn't want to let people down. It's been called like fan fiction. So I would be doing like a recap of it, but I would add conversations that didn't happen.
Kind of like how Brian Moylan does at the end of all of his recaps?
It was more like Richard Lawson, like before.
Okay.
It was more similar to that. Actually, I thought about that today because somebody wrote me asking me for a quote about Dorit Hemsley. And like why she's the anti-hero. And I was like, oh, this is like tapping into my old world. Let me tell you what I wrote.
Okay.
He said, I'm working on a story on why Dorit Hemsley is one of TV's greatest anti-heroes. Don Draper and Tony Soprano wish they could be as diabolically loved as Dorit is. Wondering if you had a moment to chat or offer a quote about her strengths as a housewife. And it was like, I wrote this in like a minute and a half. And I was like, oh God, those were the good days. Like maybe I need to go back to it. I wrote, Dorit Hemsley floats through scenes. Her hair ornamentations, undersized satchels, and luxury brand biker shorts somehow distract the audience from her stealth work as an instigator. She prods castmates with 14-karat gold tongs and then backs away with the grace of an Olympic ice dancer. No one can ever address her story inconsistencies or passive-aggressive jabs because she has a gentle-sounding voice and peppers conversations with anecdotes about her young children and love of art and sunshine. So, like, that was what I would do. I would take an episode and then I would talk about it, but, like, add make-believe conversations. And so anyway, I did it for a while, and then I started being invited on podcasts to to talk about Real Housewives. And then I thought, I have an idea for a show. So I met with the head of Wondery Network and said, I have this idea about tracking people down who have been on reality shows and asking them, like, how did it affect their life and how did it change the trajectory of their life? And that was sort of, and then I also said, and I think it would be fun to ask different people about their reactions to reality shows. So that was 4 years ago in September. And that's how the show started. And then it kind of continued from there. And by then I also having children.
So going back to the OC, so you were telling me earlier that you actually live in Newport, which is a gorgeous coastal town, basically between LA and San Diego.
Yeah, pretty much.
And so do you know any of the people from legit Real Housewives of OC?
I know a lot of them. Heather Dubrow and I have lots of friends that overlap. And Shannon too. I see Shannon out at the local restaurant that my husband and I go to all the time. I've seen Tamara out. Kelly Dodd I've known for years. Bronwyn I've known for a long time. Yeah, I know a lot of them. A lot of people tried out for the show.
Oh, really? You know people who have tried out for the show?
I have, yeah. But it didn't work out for one way or another. Maybe their spouse wasn't really into being on the show, or they had second guess, or maybe they didn't get through a couple layers. You often hear, oh, they were asking me to be on the show. And I'm like, I don't think so.
Right.
You really have to have a very interesting life. How do I say this? There's a certain archetype to be on a show like that. And I think in theory, a lot of people go, oh, my friend Karen or Lorraine or whatever would be great on that show. But then you start to present them with, this is what this would mean. And people are like, oh, forget it. Like, that's not
right.
And also, I think people really, and I know the casting agent of Orange County Housewives always says this too, like, people think that they're very interesting, but then they're not interesting for TV. And there's like a difference.
Tell me what she says the difference is.
Well, an interesting person in real life is like you sit down with them at dinner and you have this really meaningful conversation and you connect, and it's a reciprocal relationship. And somebody who's interesting on TV is because you're transfixed by them, but it's a one-sided relationship. They're entertaining you rather than you're both being entertained by each other.
I think the perfect example of that is like Erica Jane. Like, it's not two-way. It's very one-way.
Yeah. Well, but I think that she's probably a really interesting person to talk to. I think she's probably a little bit more engaging than other people. So I think there are other ones that they will never, I don't think Shannon would ever ask you anything about yourself. She's good TV because she will lift her top up and say, I'm fat right now and here's why. Do you know a lot of people that would do that?
No, of course not.
Or if they did do that season 1, they wouldn't do it season 2 because they're like, well, my sister told me I looked really bad on TV. And then they're self-editing. And quite frankly, a lot of them try to do that anyway.
Uh-huh.
But I think it takes somebody who is sort of, they're unfiltered, they're not self-aware, and they're relentless in their pursuit for fame. I don't think, if you really think about it, you know a lot of people like that. It's kind of like the manifestation of a young Instagram influencer, like the ones who are like newly married and they're like matching outfits with their husband, and their plans are to have a child that they put in a matching outfit, and they don't want other people to know that they may go bankrupt and that they live in an apartment. That's the personality type, that they're relentless in their pursuit for you to see them one way, without really having any self-awareness and any indication of allowing you really into their lives.
Right. Yeah, you are completely dead on. Have you watched all of Selling Sunset?
Of course.
Okay, so we got to get into this. So I was so resistant to even like press play, to even like start it up. So I literally only watched it in this past week, and I devoured the whole thing within like 3 days. Yeah. And what's interesting, so I'm actually a huge fan of $1 Million Listing. Like, I watch both LA and New York, and it's very interesting to compare the two shows. Like, it's basically, like, for anybody who hasn't seen it, you definitely have to watch it. It's on Netflix, and it's almost as if the cast of $1 Million Listing were filled with the Real Housewives of Beverly Hills, right?
Well, you have to remember that the director is Adam DeVello, who did The Hills. So it's shot stylistically like The Hills. It's really not a real estate show. Yeah, they're going to tell you what the estimated price is, and there will be scenes where you're in a house and there are people who are presenting themselves as real estate agents. But it's not really a show about real estate. It's like more about a show about people in a certain age group that are somewhat professional in West Hollywood.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
So it's not, so anybody who's like, oh, well, I love HGTV shows about real estate. I'm like, this is not your scene. If you
Yeah.
like Siesta Key and The Hills, then you would like that.
Totally. If you like Laguna Beach, if you like The Real Housewives, this is for you. But it's Million Dollar Listing shows way more of the actual real estate and the transaction and negotiation. Like, I don't think they hardly show any negotiation on Selling Sunset. It's much more the interpersonal drama that's going on.
Exactly. Because Christine's been on my show. She's my friend. And
Christine Quinn.
and she's like, it's really about people who are coworkers. It's about it's about coworker drama, not about will this 4-bedroom home sell on Galaxy Way. It's like I lied to you, or not I lied to you. I got married and I didn't want to invite you to the wedding because you said this thing and it pissed me off. It's more about that. It's not so much a reality show.
So basically, the conceit of the show is that these two twin brothers, the Oppenheim brothers, they have this brokerage called the Oppenheim Group, and they've basically employed all of these what looks like, they look like models. Like, some of them are actresses. In fact, one of them is like for sure an actress. She's actually been on The Young and the Restless and All My Children. She was married to Justin Hartley from This Is Us. So there is a bit of there's a performance to the entire thing. And what's interesting is that it almost makes Million Dollar Listing look scrappy, because as you were saying, this show, even like the soundtrack, the color, does Netflix just must have a much higher budget than Bravo? The way it's filmed,
it's beautiful. And they have a score too. What television show has a score? They have a score. Yeah, so just keep in mind it's the same director as The Hills. So you're going to get a beautifully shot show.
The women, I know this woman, Christine, is, well, I have something to say about Christine Quinn. She's very much playing full reality TV villain, like almost in the vein of like Jerry Manthe from Survivor, or she actually reminds me a lot of Amanda Woodward from Melrose Place. Like, she's literally like chewing the scenery, like, as she's going through these episodes. So like, she's probably who the audience will gravitate toward the most. But aside from her, the conversations they're totally vapid. The women are like kind of brain dead. Like, the conversations are just like, the show is absurd. Like, I couldn't believe that I got sucked in. Because I was so resistant, and I was like, why do I, like, what am I liking about this? And I was trying to figure it out.
Yeah, it's because it's just so pretty, and then the scenes because you can binge it, it's seamless, one episode into the next. And I do think that the personalities are funny. I think Christine's really funny on TV.
Yeah,
and she's really funny and normal and cool in real life.
How do you know her?
And she does wear sweatpants and stuff. We met because of the show, and then we end up just talking all the time.
So do we know if these women who are like basically Playboy Bunny pretend brokers, like, do they really have their real estate license? I assume they do.
They do. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I'm also assuming that it's the brothers, because the brothers come off as very legit. Like, I watched a couple interviews with them, and they come off very, very legit. Like, I think both of them actually are former attorneys, and they made the transition to real estate. They seem like very, very bright guys. I'm assuming that they get the listings, and then they give it to these women to run the open houses to attract the billionaires.
No, they do have listings. It's just not all of them are working they're not working as hard as Josh Altman, right? Like, Heather is in a relationship with Tarek. They basically live here in Newport. They don't, like, she's not in LA selling condos anymore. and even though this was filmed before their relationship really began to get hot and heavy, but Christine has other things outside of real estate. So in $1 Million Listing, you're going to see Tracy and Josh Flagg, and this is their job 24/7. You have people on Selling Sunset. Yes, you have the Oppenheimer brothers, but you have a group of people that also do other things. Like Chrishell still acts. So she's selling real estate and acting,
Yeah, she's legitimately on The Young and the Restless right now.
It's so weird. It's just really weird. It's just so weird. And I don't know why she's on the show, because she just seems like, what's the word I'm looking for? Like a pageant. She's like a pageant girl.
Yes.
Yes, she just sort of like, I just want to go, you hate everybody, just admit it.
Right. Well, that's why I was saying that they come off as brain dead and like totally vapid, because they're literally saying nothing. And the quotables that they have are like the most obvious, what did they say? It's only going to take, it takes a special type of person to buy a $40 million house. Like, no fucking shit. Like,
yeah, right. I know.
What's interesting is that it seems like they filmed almost like a double season of Selling Sunset, because season 2 just came out and season 3 is about to come out like the first week of August. So they must have filmed this all at once.
They filmed it all at once, and then they decided to take a little break in between season 2 and 3 to air it, which is smart, because people are even more excited for season 3, because that's when the whole divorce thing happens.
Yes. So, okay, tell me if I'm on or off about this. The divorce between Chrishell and Justin Hartley, the actor. This is the actor-actress pair from This Is Us. Is this not reminiscent of Camille Grammer, Kelsey Grammer?
Yes, there are definitely layers that are very similar. I suspect that there was a woman in the wings the entire time, and she was blindsided by it.
Wow.
But others within, I'm not saying Christine, this was before I even talked to Christine, have suggested, and you can look it up, that this is what the going story is that he had somebody in the wings, but then he was like one of those gaslighters that was like, I don't know, maybe you're cheating on me. And she's like, I'm not cheating on you. Like, they project it like they're the cheater. Mm-hmm. And so when he filed, it was abrupt, and she disagreed with the separation date. So I don't really know what happened. All I know is that it happened pretty abruptly, and she seems to be blindsided. I say move on. Is he that great? Yeah, he was on a popular show for a hot minute, but is he going to be that cute in 7 years? Maybe not.
I mean, to me, it all just tease up the anticipation for season 3. I mean, it's just obvious why they like stopped it here and then like, or why they kept rolling the entire time. It's like kind of brilliant. So anyway, like, it's absurd. It does seem universally beloved. Like, people are upset. Like, in fact, I have a friend who literally muted the phrase Selling Sunset on Twitter because so many people were talking about it.
Oh, good. I'm glad they are. I hope they listen to my Christine interview.
I'll send it on. Okay, I want to like give my final thoughts on Tinsley's last episode on Real Housewives of New York. What did you think of the way they wrapped up her storyline?
Well, I think that they had no choice. Her goal was always to just get married. She's not somebody she's already had a ton of press her whole life, right? Especially in like the it days. So that part of her, she's already fulfilled. A lot of those housewives, that's something that they didn't have early in their life. Then they get it, and then they can't give it up. It's like all that Tinsley ever wanted was to get married and have a child. So once Scott finally came to his senses and was like, okay, let's move forward, that's all she wanted. So it was very easy for her to cut the cord. So I think that the goodbye was put together quite beautifully, because it is true to her. She wanted a fairy tale. She wants to get married. She wants to have a baby. And she doesn't give a shit about going to a vineyard and having a fight with any of those women, because she probably won't even be friends with them ever again.
For sure. So my only complaint, and I actually really like Tinsley. Like, I definitely feel that in the canon of New York Housewives, we will look back on Tinsley very fondly. Like 10 years from now or whenever it ends, I think that, you know, she's certainly like light years ahead of like a fucking Kristen Takeman who was goddamn awful, you know. Like Tinsley actually like gave something to the show, but she was kind of like under the radar about it. But if you really think about it, she, first of all, the fact that we were able to see the moment where she met this guy that became her whole storyline, being on again, off again, winds up marrying the guy, the fact that this was captured, their first date on the show, is amazing. She came with a mom. That alone, if you come with a great mom, it's a total bonus. And that she, more than anything, I always felt that she was authentic. She never seemed to be putting on an act the way Dorinda, all Dorinda does is put on this act. The same for like Sonia too. Like it's all an act. Whereas Tinsley, I really felt like we were getting the real girl. And so for that reason, I always really loved her. Here was my only issue with it. I felt that it was a real disservice to the audience to have it crammed into one episode. I really felt like we needed one episode kind of her making the decision to, I mean, maybe they would have had to film some extra scenes. I get it. They probably literally only had like these 4 scenes of her.
She just disappeared though. She got engaged and then she just went off the grid. So your hands are tied. You can't really have somebody come back and fill in things and tie up stuff when they're like, I'm done. Yeah. And I don't think Scott really wanted her to film, so you can't do much.
Yeah. You know those last scenes, for sure the scene where she was in the car, like looking off into the sunset and like driving away. For sure that scene. And also the scene where she met up with Ramona and Luann at T-Bar, those both felt like pickup scenes. And maybe too, even the one where she was packing with Dale, Sonia, and Leah. Those all felt, the scenes were almost like too relaxed. Like it felt
maybe
like,
it's possible. But just know she's begrudgingly participated. She was like very over it. Yeah.
Are you talking about this season specifically, or once they got in? Really?
Yeah, she just was like over it. Listen, if you really want to get married and you have said to your partner, I will move to Chicago, I've got eggs frozen, I want to make this happen. And he's like, it's a real issue for me that you're on the show because although I participated in the first season, like I'm getting a lot of kickback and I run a company and this is not for me. For her, it was like, all right. And I think we all can kind of relate in some way to that when you are in a love relationship and you know, I'm going to have to make some sort of sacrifice to make this work. And I kind of have to rip the Band-Aid off. And so for her, I think she was like, you know, where I am in my life, I don't need this show anymore. Mm-hmm. And I've actually read places and it kind of makes sense that she just kind of considers them like rich white trash. Mm. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, yeah, I mean, if you grow up in like a mega mansion, right?
Yeah.
And you go to the Lawrenceville school and then you go to Columbia and you get to run in circles with the DuPonts and Vogue editors. And then you have the Samantha Thasta bag line in Japan and people in Asia go crazy for you. To find yourself at a crappy bar in New York City with women who have their tits hanging out, you're probably like, this ain't my jam, friends.
Yeah. What do you think is the best, like, what is your favorite franchise?
New York is my favorite because I think it seems most at home to me. Like, I feel like their sense of humor is more similar to mine, where I'm very dry, and their clothing, like they're more conservative like I am. I live in a town where people wear sky tops, you know, like very much bedazzlement. And that is not me. I feel like I'm a New Yorker. Like, I want to talk to you about where you went to school and what your job is and what book you're reading. I don't want to talk to you about like whether or not you have a boat. So I never really feel like I fit in Orange County. So New York is, now if they had the Real Housewives of the mainline Philadelphia, I'd be thrilled out of my mind. That's the franchise they're missing. That would be a great show. But yeah, so I think that Beverly Hills, because I find that city is so weird, but I sometimes think there's some characters they're missing, and I don't know if it's possible to get them.
Tell me about the types of characters that are floating around Beverly Hills that we would be missing.
In Beverly Hills, they need somebody who's the wife of a studio executive, because those are the real power players in the city of Los Angeles and the entertainment industry. It's not Kyle Richards, who was a former child actress who happens to be married to somebody with a real estate agency. The power players are the people that have close proximity to studio heads, to network executives. So I want to see somebody who's the wife of the head of, ABC TV, somebody who, I want to see Bob Iger's wife, Willow Bay, who used to be a reporter in her own right and still kind of does work. But Bob Iger from Walt Disney, I want to see that wife. I don't know if they can get access to those people, but That's the real Housewives of Beverly Hills, in the same way that I think New York needs a hedge fund wife. And that's why I suggested, and they didn't take my suggestion, which I'm still pissed about, Anthony Scaramucci and his wife, because they need hedge fund money. They need a hedge fund person.
Why didn't they take, I know that they were in the running. Why, do you have any insight on why they didn't cast her?
I always forget to ask, which is stupid. But I do suspect one part of it is they started talking about how they were in the running, and that's sort of the nail in your coffin.
Yes.
You can't talk about Fight Club if you're not in Fight Club yet.
Right. This actually reminds me, literally yesterday, I saw on Instagram, Carrie Duber was talking to some other, I think maybe a new housewife of Dallas. And I think that new housewife on Instagram in plain sight wrote, "Hey, Carrie, it looks like you're officially a friend of this season." And I'm sitting there.
No.
First of
Can't do it.
First of all, it struck me as like, I'm not on a television show and I don't work for a television show. How is it that I know and I understand clear as day that you're not supposed to do that? Like, why do all of these women communicate in the public eye as opposed to like an actual private text message?
Because it goes back to this. A lot of these people never worked. They're housewives. So they married somebody, maybe they lived like some sort of lifestyle. And the element that's been missing in their life is the attention they believe they deserve. So they're plucked from obscurity. They go on a show. People are worshiping them. Where'd you get those sunglasses? I love your hair that way. Maybe they're blowing their bank out to maintain that look. And now they think that they have finally arrived. Everybody in the world has been like living in the shadows. I am a made star. Why, I should have been a star the whole time. They don't even see themselves as like on an ensemble because they don't understand professional lives. They've never worked on a team. They've never been an account director. They've never had a boss. They've always been in the sidelines as a mother or a wife. And so they become monsters and they don't understand, and they think that they are qualified to be in every media outlet in the world. I mean, I've seen this for 4 years where it's like, Sarah McGee doesn't want to do your show because she wants to do interviews with like Marie Claire. I'm like, first of all, she's too old for Marie Claire. Hate to break the news to her. And also, no one from Marie Claire gives two shits. They think that they are super time movie stars, and it's just like, then that's why it's lightning in a bottle. Is that you take people who are really they have no sense of awareness, and you put them on a show with other people like themselves, and they all fight each other, and it's like fascinating. It's really a show about personality clashes and interpersonal communication. And once in a while you get some really thoughtful conversations. Like I thought when Carol Razuel and Dorinda were sitting on a bed in London in a hotel talking about what it was like to be widows, I was like, now that's great TV.
Both Carol and Dorinda are two of the smartest housewives that have ever been cast across all franchises, and they're two of the most empathic.
Oh, I mean, she is good TV, but I feel like somebody in her inner circle, if she has anyone left, needs to say, you need to dial it back, sister. But I don't know. I'm trying to be like thoughtful about it, but like maybe she didn't formally grieve, and then she became this big TV star, and then it became like
it literally consumes her life. Like, this is a woman who I get a notification on my phone at like 7 a.m. Dorinda Medley is going live. But like, why are you going live the minute you open your eyes? I swear to God, she goes live at all hours of the day.
She needs to be getting attention 24/7. That is horrendous. But I feel like, you know what consumes a lot of them? Other housewives and how many followers they have.
Yes.
And there's also a war within the world, like who has that social media guy and can I have him? And should I go on these live events? And a lot of their infighting then on the show becomes more about that person gets a higher appearance fee, but maybe I'll get a bigger appearance fee if I bring it next season, and then they go over the top. I feel like it gets a little stale. And I think they're trying to figure out ways to like fix the system, because I think we may see our last days of the Housewives.
Well, it seems like I saw something online that this new season of, is it true that this new season of Dallas is going to air on that streaming network, the NBC streaming network?
It's very possible because their ratings were not very high.
Do you think that Real Housewives of Salt Lake City will, I don't understand the thought process behind that, like versus going with the Real Housewives of Chicago, or how you just said Philadelphia, the main line, because then we'd get a racially diverse cast. I feel like with Salt Lake City, I have no interest in watching another group of straight white women.
Correct. I think they realize that now, probably. Yep, and they've switched the production company.
I heard that.
Shed's going to go in and redo it. Yeah, I think
so wait, can you break down exactly what happened? Did they film and now they have to scrap a bunch of it? Like, what happened with the filming?
Yeah, sometimes they happen. What happens is that the production company shows the network footage, like this is what we have, and then the network steps in and says, we don't like the way that you've packaged it. We're going to send it to another production company to do stuff and post edit to like fix it. And so that's what's happened apparently with Salt Lake. And I'm sure they'll do a great job.
Shed is who produces New York.
Correct. They're really good. So I just think that, listen, it's 2020. People are eager for stories about not just like a diverse cast, but I also think it's a little bit stale. I think people want to see people that are building things and not building images. And the Real Housewives is about building an image. And I think people are tired of that. And after they've been living in quarantine, they want to see some inspirational stuff. And if somebody's been furloughed or they lost their job, do they really want to see somebody waving their Birkin in their face? I don't think they do.
Right.
And so I just think it was a great ride. And I'm not discounting them out for, but I'm just saying I think that they have to really switch things up.
Yeah.
And it's surprising to me that people like Tamra and Vicky are like shocked that they were let go. I'm like, there's no story there anymore. I know you. I know your life. I want to see something new. I want to see something presented to me that I have never seen before. I want a window into someone's world that I've never seen before. I've seen your house. I know who your kids are and your husband, and you can't reinvent the wheel. There's nothing there anymore.
To this exact point, did you have a chance to watch Disclosure on Netflix?
No, I'm going to watch that probably tomorrow.
Okay. Well, Disclosure is really, it's one of the best documentaries that I've watched in the past like 6 months or so. In the past 6 months, it's basically a look at the past 100 years of how trans people have been treated in film and TV. Laverne Cox is pretty much the face of it. Candace Cain is a big fixture in it. And what I love about every single person seen on camera is trans. And that's like a first ever.
Yeah. I think that is exactly what's happening is people are eager for new storytelling. They want to see a diversity. They want to see stories having to do with gender fluidity, all kinds of, I think minority groups are eager to have their stories told, and I think people are eager to hear them.
Do you watch Pose?
I don't.
It's a phenomenal show, and we're lucky enough that actually in Disclosure it is so current. Like, it starts from the beginning of trans representation, and actually includes the Pose representation, and you should absolutely watch Pose. It's just a phenomenally produced show. It's Ryan Murphy, and actually
Oh, yeah.
both seasons of Pose, season 1 and 2, are now also on Netflix. And it's a fictionalized version about the voguing world and the underground ballroom scene in the late 80s and early 90s in New York. And it's based on the documentary Paris is Burning,
Which is excellent. That's on my list. I have a list out of the best things to watch.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Yeah.
Talk about Paris is Burning for people who may not be
Paris
familiar.
isn't burning. It was really important because it was the first time people really were open up to that underground world, and it's referenced all the time. And I'm not surprised that Disclosure would kind of harken back to that. That's great. I think that it's funny because I would say, if somebody said to me, "What is Jess's superpower?" I'd say, you have a real finger on the pulse for music. Like, so your sensibility, like you're probably watching and can recommend things that are music related in a way that I think, like, I'm really, I can recommend good ones about sports. So some of the stuff, like the shows that I recommend to people, are more sports related, like, but they're not all ones that you have to love sports to really want to get into. Like the 30 for 30 series, Chris Herron's story. He was an addict that played professional basketball. Or the Last Dance with Michael Jordan and the Bulls final season was excellent. There's a really good show on Netflix called QB1, Beyond the Lights, which features 3 high school quarterbacks in each episode, their last year of football before they play in college. And I like it because each player comes from a totally different region of the country. So you have like a kid who's from Florida and his parents are white and they're very privileged. And then you have a kid in New Orleans his mom's a single mother and she's just trying to like pay bills. But the community in New Orleans is so supportive of football that they've rallied around this kid and given him excellent coaching and support. And it's just like a window into other people's lives. And though the theme is high school football, it's really about like a sense of community and when somebody is really talented. So I mean, it's a long answer to whatever we were talking about, but there's so much great stuff to watch that is not Housewives. And I that's why I think my show, I just feel like there's so much other stuff that's so great on TV to watch.
I totally agree. And I think there's also stuff I try to infuse, in fact, like an episode that just came out, I interviewed, there's this guy who he's over in London. He used to work for the BBC and he has a Madonna focused podcast. And my listeners know I am a huge Madonna fan. She is my number one for life. And his podcast, it's called Inside the Groove. And every episode he focuses on one iconic Madonna song. Right now he's trying to do one song from every one of her albums, and he has access to the multi-tracks, or like what's called the stems, which is basically the individual tracks of like the drums, the bass, the vocals, and he literally splices it all up and shows how the song was built from the ground up. And so I had him on, and like I chatted with him, and it was amazing. And I hope, listen, if I'm really into something, I trust that like the listeners will be really into it as well. Cause I'll give them Bravo next. Listen, they're getting Bravo right now, this conversation.
I have a good Madonna story that just was told to me yesterday.
Tell me right now.
My friend is an actress, an older actress. And she was telling me that she knew Madonna before she was famous. And she was like, Kate, she was just like this she was kind of chubby. Mm-hmm. But she would say things like, my mother was beautiful and I'm beautiful too. She said what set her apart was her confidence. And she was like, now I think about it, like, she's like, I was so insecure and she just always was so confident. And that if we could all bottle that, like, we would have been more successful. She said that was what the difference was. She was like, I am amazing. And then I think if you carry that, people believe you and they treat you like that. It's all about like believing that. I just was like, I was just remember thinking, I got to tell my kids that.
Yeah, that's amazing. I think too, Lady Gaga has that. I think she also had that quality, because when I watch those videos, because you can go back and watch these videos when she was Stephanie Germanotta performing at the bitter end here in the Village, and granted, the music is nothing. Like, she was much more of like an Amy Winehouse, Fiona Apple type. Like, she was a literal singer-songwriter. And then this producer packaged her into Lady Gaga. The music was not like super pop music. It was all piano-based, like Tori Amos, Fiona type. But she still was able to transfix the room. Like, you can't stop looking at her.
Yeah, this friend of mine said, Kate, you and we suffer from imposter syndrome. And I was like, yeah, that's true. That people who go on to things like that, like a Kanye West, does not suffer from imposter syndrome. You know, he's never like, oh God, someone's going to figure out maybe I'm not the best one in the room. Like, they just are like, I'm amazing. It's kind of just interesting, you know?
Who's your dream interview?
Andy Cohen was never going to come on my show. I've asked a million times. No, it's not going to happen. Bethany Frankel, I've asked a million times. It's not going to happen. And I used to say they would be my dream, but now I'm kind of like, fuck them. And Bethany, I'm like, I don't know if I'm totally interested in her story anymore.
See, I'm interested in her reflection upon the housewives' experience.
I think what she says now is too based in bitterness. So she's not going to be an interesting interview maybe for another 5 years. Yeah, that's probably when I would actually be granted an interview if I'm still doing this. But like Anthony, what's his name? Hello.
Andy Cohen.
Hello. Andy Cohen, I'm like, why would you not do my show? I've interviewed like all of your talent, so many of your producers, like there's a whole like weird thing.
But what do you want to ask him? Like what are you looking to find out that we don't already know?
Yeah, maybe there is nothing else to ask. I think it's more about behind the scenes stuff, like what it's really like to manage the egos of these women. That's what I find at this point in my career and life really most fascinating, is the management of the personalities behind the scenes.
I find it very interesting how he has very slowly distance himself from the talent and the shows in general. Like, for example, when all the shit went down with Stassi and Kristen and Jax, like recently in the past few months, all he says is, I have nothing to do with that show. I just host the reunions. I'm just a fan. Like, he doesn't, which is all true, but he used to be much more engaged in the actual show.
I mean, doesn't it seem like he's probably setting the trail now to leave? I don't know. I feel like, I don't know what the term would be. I don't think he's going to be there much longer. I don't. And I don't know who's going to take over. I suspect somebody who's in-house at Bravo, like somebody who is on a show or somebody who works behind the scenes of production that would take over for him. But I don't really see him there for a long time.
And then what do you see him doing in the future?
I mean, he's like burnt out, I'm sure. He's probably going to create shows and then like, I just don't see him. I think this is all kind of boring for him now. I feel like he's like, I'm over it.
I get the impression that, yes, if he were to sort of wrap up in the next year, 2 years, I feel like he's almost like, I don't need this shit. Like, just with the whole, quote unquote cancel culture. Like, I think that he's like, I don't need my reputation to potentially be ruined for some random thing I say on a Tuesday on Twitter. And he's kind of like, let me just get out while I'm ahead and just check out.
I know, or I don't know, but I mean, I think he really loves television news. I could see him trying to do something 60 minutes-ish, but with a pop culture kind of angle to it. I think that he loves stuff like that, like really going in deep with people. So maybe something like that. But I feel like the minutia of these housewives, he's like over. And I can't blame him. You know what I mean? Like, does he want to sit and talk to the stew from Below Deck every Wednesday? Or
This has been fun chatting with you. I love you have some like really great insight. I like your perspective on all this. I can relate to a lot of what you're saying. So everybody Reality Life is everywhere. And if people want to chat with you online, where can they find you?
So my Facebook group is Reality Life with Kate Casey. My Twitter is at Kate Casey. I really love Twitter. I know a lot of people hate it,
I love it.
but I like to chat with people about what they're watching. So I think it's really a valuable platform, and I wish more people were involved. But I tweet about shows and during shows all week long. And then my Instagram is at Kate Casey CA, and I will tell you what I'm watching all week long.
This is so fun. Thank you so much, Kate.
Anytime. Come on my show anytime. Jess Rothschild is a real gem. She is a star. She's a great interviewer. She's a good gal. She is your friend in New York City who's super smart, very observant, very kind. She's going to deep dive hot takes, but you know what the best thing about you is?
Do tell me.
You're just a good person.
Thank you.
You deserve a lot. You're a good person.
Thank you. I appreciate that. All right, guys, you can follow me, Jess X NYC. You can follow the show account, Hot Takes Deep Dives, and we'll see you soon. Thanks, guys.